Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1971 crime thriller film, The Anderson Tapes. Now, The Anderson Tapes is based upon a book of the same name by the author Lawrence Sanders. I've never read it, but if it's as dull as this movie is, I definitely don't want to read it anytime soon. This is one of those films that I honestly did not know that much about other than I think it was included in a multi-pack that I got a while back with a bunch of other random movies. But other than that, I didn't really have a whole lot of knowledge, let alone a recollection of this movie. And after watching it and barely even being able to remember what I saw, yeah, I can see why this is a relatively obscure movie in Sean Connery's filmography. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, I would like to give a special shout out to Sean for requesting this review. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I'll try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Anderson Tapes is directed by Sidney Lumet, who is a really accomplished, very acclaimed director who has a ton of great films on his filmography for his overall credits. I mean, you've got the original 12 Angry Men, which I believe he actually was nominated for an Oscar for. You've got Dog Day Afternoon, Network, Prince of the City, Serpico, The Wiz. You know, this is a very talented and really highly regarded filmmaker. This is easily one of his weakest efforts as a director. It's so weak that if you didn't know that it was directed by Sidney Lumet, you would never really think that it was. You would be like, nah, no way. There's no way that this was directed by the same guy who would do Serpico 2 years later. But it is. The direction in this is laborious, it's slow, and it's a big part of why this movie is such a dull and boring, listless watch. Because so much of the direction is just very drawn out from one scene to the next. And it's not drawn out in a way to create some more effective tension or to improve the timing of a scene or to enhance a certain emotion in a sequence. It's just drawn out for some inane reason. Uh, I mean, there are multiple scenes that you can tell took way more takes than they needed to, and as a result, a lot of the people involved in those scenes visibly look a little tired and haggard and kind of done with it all. There are other moments in this movie visually that are just not very striking. If you're going to make a movie that is, for the most part, not really that unique or original in terms of its plot involving a caper, a heist, you got to add some signature style and flair to it. But what this film delivers when it comes to those elements is not much of anything. There are multiple points in this movie, directing wise, where it honestly looks like something you would have seen on television back then in the early 70s. Completely unimpressive direction, and not even really a good usage of pans or zooms most of the time either. There's some moments where the camera movement is not totally rigid, but a lot of the time it's very stiff and very reminiscent of a wooden board. And then there's other moments where the direction will just be genuinely bad. Like, there are some moments where LeMay frames his shots in a distracting manner. that's really amateurish. Because there's an entire shot where there's a member of Anderson's crew, and there are shots of this guy who's a part of the the crew that's going to do the heist. And this character is clearly standing in front of a white wire that is covering up a part of his face. And Lumet just shot the scene with the wire in the way. Who does that? I don't care how critically acclaimed of a director he is. I don't care if he was nominated for an Oscar for 12 Angry Men in 1957. That is some hacky shit. Like, there's no excuse for it. It doesn't actually add anything to the scene. It doesn't make it better. It just is like, there's this fucking white cord that's in front of this guy's face. Why is it there? So, there are moments like that in the movie, directing wise, that are bad. And at best, it's just meh. It's middle tier directing. There's nothing about the direction in this from a filmmaker like Lumet that elevates the production. Now, the screenplay is by Frank Pearson, and Frank Pearson, I would say one of his most recognizable works as a screenwriter is A Star is Born, the original A Star is Born, which he also directed. He also did Cool Hand Luke and Cat Ballou. Dog Day Afternoon is another one that he also wrote. This script is nowhere near on the same level as something like Dog Day Afternoon. This screenplay is weird. A big part of why this film doesn't work for me is because of this screenplay's weird tone. It starts from the first scene where Sean Connery's character, Safecracker John Anderson, he's being, well, I don't know if he's being interviewed. It seems like there's this guy who runs this a therapy session in prison, and he's having a Q&A session, or he's allowing people to speak. And Anderson starts talking about his sexual attraction to cracking safes. And he mentions and talks about how cracking safes is the equivalent of rape. I'm not kidding. That is actually a line in this movie, in this script, and that's how it starts out. Sean Connery talking about how cracking safes is like raping women. I'm like, whoa. Honestly, I think even back in 1971, that was still pretty uncalled for and out there. And what's nuts is that after that really uncomfortable, awkward speech about how cracking safes is like sexually assaulting women, and Anderson talking about how the whole deal, the whole act of cracking safes also makes him sexually aroused. He then there's a bit of dialogue that is actually really thought provoking and interesting, talking about hypocrisy in the media and how they portray certain things and how they discuss certain things, or hypocrisy involved in terms of how people view bankers and other people who take advantage of the system in comparison to robbers, and talk about how the people who crack safes and do all these robberies, they're doing crimes, but then when these other people in business and these other people in corporations do basically the same thing, but in a different way, it's not necessarily considered to have the same connotation associated with it. So that was interesting. Why not lead out with that? Why start out with uh, Anderson equating cracking safes to raping people? That just doesn't make any sense. And I don't care if it was in the book, it's just a bad way to start your film. And there's a fair amount of moments like that in this script. They're just awkward and weird. like random attempts at comedy that either aren't funny or are very out of place. The dialogue is just very wonky and strange and doesn't sound natural. The way that it works with its characterization is also not very good. You don't even know anything about Ingrid at all until John shows up, comes out of an elevator, meets her, and then talks about how he wants to bang her. And I'm like, okay, who is this? Is this some hooker that Anderson called? Who even is this character? Who is this person? And then you never really find out that much about her, really. Other than she shags John Anderson from time to time. And even the members of Anderson's crew, Tommy Haskins, Iron Balls, this is a different guy. This is like the cop. But like Tommy Haskins, uh, uh, Edward, Socks, uh, Pop, the Kid, like all of these different members of the crew, you barely know anything about them either. So there's no reason to really care about most of them. In fact, some of them just randomly show up and appear at some point in the plot. They weren't even a part of it before. They weren't even former prisoners like Pop or the Kid who were in jail with Anderson. They're just random people, random guns for hire. This other guy who is like a gay guy, who I would probably say is the only other character that, you know, really, I guess had any sort of distinct connection with Anderson. And it's kind of insinuated that maybe they might have worked together, but not really a whole lot beyond that. There's also this subplot going on with the FBI, I think, or the IRS I don't think it's IRS. I think it's the FBI or the CIA. And they're doing surveillance on Anderson or people around him. Hence the Anderson tapes. And if you judge the ending of this movie alone, it seems like this subplot's supposed to be a bigger deal than it actually is. Because the way the movie ends, it's like this whole surveillance thing was a big deal, and it's a big part of the film's social commentary, but it's an afterthought for the most part when it comes to the screenplay. The majority of it is about Anderson getting funds together, getting a team together to do a big heist at this apartment complex. And an hour of this movie and this script is simply devoted to build up, to setting up the crew, to getting the plans together. And it's boring. It is insufferably dull and boring and hard to sit through because it's just mostly dialogue, not a lot of action, maybe some briskly paced power walking at points from Anderson from one block to the next. Maybe that. Maybe some semi-tense meetings with a mob guy who's helping finance the heist. Some scintillating sauna meetings. Other than that, you got nothing. You got scenes involving Anderson and Ingrid and him making love to her and them having sex, like at least I think once or twice throughout the first hour of the movie. It's insinuated that Anderson has feelings for her and might want it to be more than just a flash in the pan kind of relationship, more than just a one night stand every now and then kind of thing. But it never really goes any farther than that. In fact, once she finds out that these government guys have been recording and bugging her apartment, her character is just basically out of the movie. And then when you get to the heist itself, it's also mostly tedious and tired and boring. It's not even an exciting heist. There's a lot of effort that's put into uh, um the setup where, oh, we'll show you what happened at the end of the heist, and we'll have all these different interviews with people who were robbed and try to, I guess, provide some intrigue that way and some mystery. But what happens is the heist never even actually goes through. So it's a heist movie where the heist never actually happens fully. They get away with the money and the stolen loot, but then they get caught by the cops and nobody gets away with anything. Even Anderson gets shot and then he gets taken by the cops into the elevator at the end, and it's you don't really know whether or not he's going to live or die. That's never cleared up. You have no idea. And then the government guys, the people who've been surveilling him, recording the tapes, because of the fact that if something happens, they could be held liable or there could be some kind of issue legally with them and Anderson or other people, they erase the tapes. And the last shot of the movie is just the tapes getting erased and then end credits. And I'm like, what the hell was that? It was utterly pointless. That's what it felt like. It was like the anti-heist movie. If you want to see an anti-heist movie where it's like the equivalent of Ocean's 11, some guy getting a crew together and then they go in and do the heist in the most boring way possible, and then they never get away with it, then this is a movie for you. If that's not the kind of thing that sounds like fun or sounds like it's worth your time, this is definitely not something I would recommend. What in the hell is that? Like, what the hell were they thinking? And if the non-heist thing is not bad enough, there's extended scenes with the cops trying to find them or trying to get ready to get into the building that are equally as tedious and boring to watch as any of the heist scenes. So even the bits where the cops wind up catching them is not that exciting. Ooh, a van flips over one time. The truck tries to drive away, but then it crashes relatively easy and the cops surround everybody. Oh, Anderson gets shot in the back. There's some potential here with this story to have some sort of tension with Socks in particular. This guy who is forced to come along with Anderson and the crew by the mob boss because it's all a setup, because a mob boss wants Socks dead. So he has him become a member of Anderson's crew for this heist. And then he basically hires one of Anderson's crew to kill Socks. But Socks doesn't know what's going on, so you can play around with that. Play around with the tension of, well, Socks doesn't know what's going to happen, but what will happen if he does figure it out? And what is the consequence of having this guy in the crew? And you see a little bit of that because he's overly aggressive and violent and flies off the handle and is a liability, but just really flesh that out more, expand upon that more. That would definitely help add some extra intrigue to this, honestly, kind of anemic story. Because so much of it is just build up to a heist, and then the heist happens and it's boring, and then the heist never actually goes through in the end anyway. And also expand upon the tape stuff, expand upon the surveillance stuff, expand upon that aspect of the story. Make it more clear as to why they're even surveilling Anderson or recording these tapes to begin with. Why are they doing this? Talk about the implications of surveillance and the effect that that has on people, and uh, the legality of it, and the social commentary aspect of it all, in terms of, well, they're criminals, but if they're doing this illegally, well, then that's wrong. But what if it's something that actually benefits other people? What if it's something that prevents crimes or prevents other things from happening in the future, but it's still illegal? And how far are we willing to take this? How far are we willing to go? No, that's not expanded upon, even though it's called the Anderson tapes. And then, like I said, you have the awkward, weird comic moments too that just completely mess things up even further. This is a bad screenplay to me personally. I don't know if this movie is I don't know if the book was as boring or as poorly thought out. If it was, should not have been a bestseller, and they should have never made a movie based on it. But if it was a better put together story, then this is a disservice to that book and to the author's work. And it's not like the dialogue is that interesting, other than maybe a couple moments here and there to make up for the other incredibly weak aspects of the screenplay. So, yeah, it's honestly unfortunate, because I think there is legitimately something interesting here, because if it's ahead of its time in terms of focusing on electronic surveillance and hidden recording devices and the commentary surrounding that, but it's done very poorly. The cast, they're trying, but there's only so much they can do with the very weak screenplay. Sean Connery, he's still pretty charming, still pretty charismatic. He's a big part of why I was still sticking through to the end with this movie, despite how quickly it lost me and how bored I was, because it was a pretty good Sean Connery performance. So I would say if you're a big fan of his, is worth one watch just for his performance. I wouldn't say it's like up there with some of his best work, but it's still a solid performance by him. He's trying to do everything he can to elevate this story and this script and this overall film. He can only go so far, but he elevates it higher than it would be if you had anyone else in the role. That's for sure. Dyan Cannon, she's gorgeous in this. Her character is pretty much nothing. There's nothing to her other than she's a side piece of John, and that's really about it. She does that role fine, does the best she can with what little she has. Still leaves an impression, because it's still, in my opinion, one of the better performances in the movie. Martin Balsam is Tommy Haskins. He's the I believe he's the gay friend of John, who is a part of the crew. It's very stereotypical, fey kind of acting, but I felt he was still pretty convincing as a gay man, compared to some of the other performances I've seen from around this time when it comes to actors trying to play gay. Um, Ralph Meeker is Iron Balls, definitely lived up to the name. Alan King is the mob boss, Pat Angelo. Um, he was decent. Dick Anthony Williams as Spencer, meh. Val Avery as Socks, and then more meh. It was cool to see Garrett Morris, one of the not ready for primetime players on SNL, in this in a bit role as Sergeant Everson. He did a good job with his small role, as well as Margaret Hamilton, the Wicked Witch of the West from Wizard of Oz, in her last theatrical role as Miss Kaler. And Christopher Walken as the kid, Kurt Spencer, the young member of the crew of Anderson's crew. And this is his first acting role in a major feature film. And you could just tell from the very first role that he did that he had something unique. He had that it factor. You know, there was definitely a lot of unique charisma and charm to him. And it's really funny when you see him say lines about how he doesn't want to get involved in violence. He doesn't want to do anything violent. And he's playing this character that is like non-violent, who's willing to be a part of this crime, but doesn't want to hurt anybody. And it's Christopher Walken. So he's still got that Christopher Walken energy. So it's one of those things where it just looks like he's being facetious, you know, or he's full of it when he's saying, I don't want to get involved in too much violence. But it's almost like he's winking at the audience and he's like, but yeah, I do. Yeah, you know, because it's Christopher Walken. But sadly, you don't really get a lot of Walken. This movie would have been better if you had more Walken, to be honest. Because he was definitely one of the better actors in the film. Now, the movie also features some cinematography by Arthur J. Ornitz and editing by Joanne Burke. The cinematography is nothing special, but the editing is awful. This is a really poorly edited movie. There are so many scenes in this that drag on forever and feel like they're padded to an extreme degree solely because of how they're edited. If this film had a better editor, that would have helped it immensely when it comes to improving its pacing. But instead, the editor that they did hire just let things drag on for way too long. Certain shots that have no business going on as long as they do are just allowed to have this almost interminable length. And if you just chop them up, that would be significantly better. I mean, we don't need to see every single cop go from one building to the next. We don't need to see that. We just need to see one cop, maybe two cops go across and swing to the next building, and then cut to a shot of them all there. You don't have to show every single cop doing that, and then previously show every single cop getting ready to do that. That's not needed. It's completely unnecessary. We don't need to see entire shots of Sean Connery walking one block to this building. You can cut those scenes up. You can make it faster. You can make it better paced. You don't have to edit it that way. But maybe that's just kind of how things were in the 70s. But even then, I think I've seen movies from around this time that still had quicker, faster paced editing. So that is not an excuse. And then the music by Quincy Jones is atrocious. This is a horrendous score. This is a really talented composer. He's done some great music. This is like the low point of his career. It's just a bunch of annoying bleeps and bloops and noises and computer noises. I hated this score. It didn't fit the tone of the movie at all either. It's like, what the hell is this? Sounds like some shit in an avant-garde sci-fi movie. Why is this in a crime thriller? That was too slow, too boring, and it's an anti-heist movie. Why the hell would I want to watch an anti-heist movie? And then you have the whole stuff with the tapes and the surveillance, and it's handled and just botched so badly that what is supposed to be a big deal at the end of the movie doesn't even feel like a big deal at all. So that's just my thoughts on the Anderson tapes. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.